All right, everybody, welcome back. We are back, ready to dive into another deep dive, and this one is juicy. We're talking about Puff Daddy,
Oh, yeah.
P. Diddy, Diddy, Sean Combs,
Whatever he's calling himself these days.
whatever he's calling himself these days, right? The man has had more names than almost anybody else in hip hop.
It's true.
It's true. So we're gonna call him Diddy for our purposes today. But
Yeah.
this is a guy who came up, started as an intern at Uptown Records,
Mm-hmm.
and built his way up to the top of the music industry. Right, won Grammys, built a business empire.
Combs Enterprises.
Combs Enterprises, exactly right.
Yeah.
But now
Now there's some serious accusations.
there's some really serious accusations against him, and this is not tabloid fodder.
Right.
This is big stuff. This is the kind of stuff that could really tarnish a legacy. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So we're talking about these gatherings, right? These private gatherings that Diddy would have, and they're called freak-offs.
Freak-offs.
And what we're hearing from various sources is that these were not your average parties. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, elaborate on that.
I mean, we're talking like hours long, some of them allegedly lasting for days.
Oh, wow.
Substances were flowing freely. The lines between like guests and employees
Oh, really?
were very, very blurred.
Oh, so this is where the power dynamic issues might come in.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where the accusations get really, really serious, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about potential coercion. We're talking about potentially using recordings of these events to control people. And when you think about the power that Diddy had at the height of his career, especially within his inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
it really does paint a disturbing picture.
Yeah, and I mean, what does that even mean for, consent is a big issue, obviously, if these are accusations that we're hearing. And the fact that it went on allegedly for so long, and this is something that, like you're saying, could really tarnish a legacy. We're talking about exploitation. We're talking about people that maybe didn't feel like they could speak up.
And what makes it even more complicated is that there are reports that these recordings, these freak-off recordings, were distributed online.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine the potential leverage that could give someone.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially if these recordings are showing something that's compromising or non-consensual.
And how do you even begin to track that down, right? I mean, if something's online, it's,
Right.
forever.
It's out there. Yeah, and it makes you wonder about like the long-term impact on the people who are involved,
Right.
like the potential for blackmail, the emotional toll. How do you come forward when you're dealing with someone as powerful as Diddy?
It's very intimidating.
It's incredibly intimidating.
Yes.
Right? So it's wild to think about. And the thing that I kept thinking about as I was reading all of this was, as shocking as these accusations are, they're not exactly new.
What do you mean?
Some of the reports suggest that this behavior, these freak-offs, they go all the way back to 2008,
Wow.
which is crazy. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
And it makes you wonder, like, why now?
Yeah. Why are people coming forward now?
What's changed? Why didn't people come forward sooner? And again, I think a lot of it comes down to the power and the influence that exists within the music industry, right?
Right.
Diddy's empire, his connections, the resources that he has at his disposal. I mean, think about how intimidating that would be to challenge someone like that.
Oh my gosh. Incredibly intimidating.
Right. You could lose your career.
Absolutely.
People could come after you.
Blacklisted.
Blacklisted, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's chilling to think about,
Yeah. It's a lot to unpack. I mean, but at the same time, we have to remember too that this is a different time.
It is a different time.
We're seeing a shift.
Yeah.
We're seeing people be a lot less tolerant of this type of behavior, alleged behavior.
Yeah.
And people are finding their voice.
Mhm.
Movements like Me Too have really, I think, emboldened people to come forward and say, hey, this isn't okay.
It's true. It's true. And we've seen it across industries, right?
Absolutely.
From Hollywood
Mhm.
to corporate America
To politics.
to politics. Yeah, I mean, it feels like no one is immune.
No one is immune.
And it's about time.
It is about time.
But shifting back to Diddy specifically,
Okay.
I mean, these accusations, if they're true, could have huge implications for his career.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about a man whose brand is built on success.
Being a businessman.
Yeah, being a shrewd businessman.
Yeah.
Being a musical icon, right?
Right.
Like his whole persona is intertwined with this image of power and
The
influence.
whole image. Yeah.
And these allegations directly challenge that.
Yeah.
So, it's not just his reputation that's on the line here. Potentially, it's his entire business empire.
Right, because we're not just talking about his music anymore.
Yes.
We're talking about Combs Enterprises.
Combs Enterprises, a massive, multifaceted entity,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's everything from Ciroc vodka
To fashion.
to Revolt TV,
Right.
Aqua Hydrate,
De Leon Tequila.
Tequila. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's kind of incredible
It is.
to think about how one person built all of that.
It's a lot.
But with these accusations out there, you have to wonder, how will this impact those businesses?
Right, because we've seen it before.
We've seen it before, yeah.
Where a celebrity is embroiled in a scandal and brands just distance themselves.
They run for the hills.
Because they're concerned about their own image, They don't want to be associated with that.
Absolutely.
It impacts their bottom line.
Yeah, and especially with someone like Diddy, who is so high profile. And these accusations are so serious. I mean, it could have a real domino effect on Combs Enterprises.
Yeah, I mean, investors might get nervous.
Oh, yeah.
Partners, they may not want to be associated. And then there's always the whole court of public opinion.
Which is huge these days.
Huge, especially with social media. I mean, news travels so fast and people are quick to make judgments.
Oh, yeah.
And brands know that, so they're often very, very cautious in situations like this.
It's all about protecting the brand.
Exactly.
So while it's too early to say definitively what the impact will be, what the fallout will be from all of this, it's safe to say that these accusations have put Diddy's entire business empire under a microscope.
Absolutely.
And people are watching.
They are watching.
But let's switch gears for a second.
Okay.
And talk about the music industry's response to all of this, because we've seen a reckoning of sorts in recent years, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
With the #MeToo movement, with this increased awareness surrounding abuse of power and exploitation.
Right.
I mean, it feels like the music industry has really been forced to take a look in the mirror.
Yeah. To confront some of its demons.
Yeah. And while some progress has been made, I mean, there's still a sense that the industry is kind of like grappling with how to handle these situations, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some artists get dropped from their labels, others face backlash.
Right.
But it's not always consistent. It feels very much like we're still in the early stages of figuring this all out.
Figuring it out and figuring out a way to make it right.
Right.
To make it just and equitable.
Exactly.
For everyone involved,
Yeah.
which is a big task.
It is a big task.
And it makes you wonder, with Diddy, given his stature, given his influence, could this case potentially be a turning point?
Oh, interesting.
Could this be a precedent-setting case?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly possible.
For how the music industry handles these accusations going forward. I mean, the outcome of this, regardless of what happens legally, I think, it could really influence how the industry responds.
Absolutely.
For similar allegations in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it could raise the bar for accountability. It could empower others to come forward.
Right.
Who knows?
I know.
Maybe it could even reshape the power dynamics
That's the hope.
that have been so ingrained in the music industry for so long.
Oh, far too long.
For far too long, yeah. It's a lot to process.
It is.
I mean, on the one hand, you have these incredibly serious accusations against Diddy, who, for all intents and purposes, has been untouchable
For a long time.
throughout his career.
Yes.
And on the other hand, we have this cultural moment that we're in,
Right.
where people are demanding justice, they're demanding accountability.
And they're not afraid to speak out?
They're not afraid to speak out. So it's a fascinating, albeit troubling case.
It is. That really does feel like it's sitting at a crossroads. Not just for Diddy and his legacy, but for the music industry as a whole.
I agree.
So we were talking about, the potential impact on Diddy's businesses.
Yeah.
And it's not like just any business.
Right.
We're talking about Combs Enterprise.
Oh, it's a whole empire.
Yeah, and it's massive.
Huge.
I mean, it's like mind-blowing to even try to wrap your head around all the different things.
He's got his hands in everything.
He does.
I mean, it's a textbook case of diversification.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not just the music stuff anymore, right?
No.
I mean, we're talking like Ciroc vodka is like their flagship brand, I think.
Huge.
Right. But then there's also like fashion with Sean John. There's media with Revolt TV. They even have like Aqua Hydrate is like a premium water brand. They've got De Leon Tequila.
And you know what's interesting about that?
What?
Is that those are all things that project a certain image.
Oh, totally.
It's a lifestyle. It's aspiration.
Luxury.
Yeah.
Success.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to remember as we're thinking about, the potential fallout from these accusations. Because brands are very, very aware of their image.
Oh, yeah.
And if they feel like a celebrity is, their reputation is tarnished.
Toxic.
Yeah, they don't want to be associated.
You don't want to be associated with that.
Right.
And we've seen it time and time again.
Absolutely. We've seen brands cut ties
Yeah.
with celebrities who are embroiled in these kinds of scandals.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it can impact their bottom line.
Oh, yeah.
Because consumers, we have a lot of power these days.
So much power.
And if we don't like what we see, we can choose to take our money elsewhere.
Exactly.
And with social media, like I said before, news travels fast.
So fast.
And public opinion can change overnight.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
So with all that said, we're talking about Diddy.
Yeah.
Huge celebrity.
Global icon. These accusations are incredibly serious.
Yeah.
Do you really think that there could be a domino effect across Combs Enterprises?
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible. Think about it. Investors, they might get nervous. They might start pulling their money out.
Yeah, they don't want to be attached to that.
Right. Partners might get cold feet about doing business with them.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole consumer backlash thing.
Mm-hmm.
People might start boycotting his products, and that can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
It's a wait-and-see kind of situation.
It is.
But I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the music industry's response to this.
Okay.
Because we've seen a real reckoning in the music industry in recent years, right?
We have.
With #MeToo and just like a general increased awareness around abuse of power and exploitation.
Right. It feels like, no industry is immune to it. But the music industry in particular, I think they've really had to take a hard look in the mirror and confront some uncomfortable truths about itself.
Yeah, and some progress has been made, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But it still feels like the industry as a whole is kind of like grappling with how to handle these situations.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Right.
We've seen artists get dropped from their labels. There have been some public apologies, some attempts at making amends.
Right.
But it doesn't always feel consistent.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a clear-cut playbook for how to handle these situations.
And every situation is different.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder with Diddy because he's such a titan of the industry.
He's a legend.
He is.
He's a mogul.
Yeah.
He's been at the top of his game for decades.
So if anyone could potentially set a precedent, it would be him.
Potentially.
Right. Could this be a turning point?
It's possible.
Yeah.
The outcome of this case, regardless of what happens legally, it could really influence how the industry as a whole responds to similar situations in the future.
Right.
Right. Will this be the thing that finally forces them to take a stand and say, enough is enough?
To make real lasting change.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's one thing to, drop an artist from a label or, issue a statement.
Right.
But it's another thing entirely to actually change the culture.
Absolutely.
To create a system where people feel safe coming forward.
Where there's accountability.
Yeah.
Where there are real consequences for these actions.
And it's about more than just Diddy.
Right.
Right. This is about a system that has allowed this kind of behavior to persist for far too long.
Exactly. This is bigger than just one person.
So yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot.
But it's an important conversation to have.
It is.
And it feels like we're at a crossroads here. Not just for Diddy, but for the music industry as a whole.
I agree.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is.
And I think it's important to remind everyone, as we're talking about all of this,
Yeah.
that as it stands, these are still allegations.
Right. Exactly. It's really important, we're talking about this, we're digging into it, but nothing has been proven in a court of law.
Right.
And, Diddy, like anyone else, he deserves due process.
Absolutely.
So it's vital to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we're not saying that he is guilty of anything.
Not at all.
But we are saying that these accusations are serious enough.
They are.
That they deserve to be investigated.
Absolutely. And they raise, bigger questions about the industry as a whole.
It's not just about Diddy, is it?
No, it's bigger than Diddy.
It's about the culture, the music industry.
Yeah.
It's about the power dynamics.
It's about, how we got here.
Mm.
How has this been allowed to go on allegedly for so long?
Yeah, and what can we do to change it? Because it's not enough to just talk about it.
Yeah.
We have to actually do something.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what can we do? What can our listeners do?
Well, I think it starts with education.
Okay.
Educating ourselves about these issues, raising awareness,
Mhm.
having these uncomfortable conversations, talking to our friends and family.
Yeah,
And then, it's about supporting survivors,
absolutely.
listening to them, believing them.
Because for so long, they haven't been heard.
Exactly.
And it's also about holding abusers accountable,
Yes,
no matter who they are,
no matter how famous they
no
are.
matter how much power they have.
Because power should never be an excuse for abuse.
Exactly.
And I think, it's about changing the system, because
Yeah.
the system is what allows this to continue.
Right. It's like we're trying to put out a fire with a teaspoon
Right.
when we need the whole fire department.
We need a whole system overhaul.
Yeah, and that's a much bigger, it's a much longer conversation. But it's a conversation that we have to start having.
We do.
We have to start having it now.
Today.
So I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But this conversation is far from over.
It's just the beginning, really.
It is. It's just the beginning. This is an ongoing story, and there's still a lot that we don't know.
Right.
So we encourage you, our listeners,
Yes.
to keep digging,
Do your own research.
keep asking questions,
Don't be afraid to speak up,
and most importantly, keep listening to survivors.
because they deserve to be heard.
And together, I really believe
Me too.
that we can create change.
We can make a difference.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes. Thank you.
Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly,
Stay loud.
stay loud.